Hello and welcome back to the Dual Screams podcast. That's right. It is October. It is spooky season. And this is the last episode of spooky horror games for the month. And I think I saved the best for last. But you know me, I always sneak in more horror stuff because I'm a huge horror nerd. Joining us this week, and I'm very excited about this one, is Rafał Sankowski, developer of Holstin, a psychological survival horror game set in an eerie, isolated 90s Polish town consumed by an ominous presence. How's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's going great. I have coffee.
Yeah, you do.
I'm sitting comfortably.
Show off your little your pretty mug for
Yeah,
the video.
it's a Dunder Mifflin mug with you know, world's best boss description.
I can confirm that you are the world's best boss. Now, I do want to share something before we started recording the show proper. I asked you how you pronounce your name, and I thought that your last name was Sankowski. And you said that the word cow in Polish means feces.
Exactly, yeah. So it's Sankowski,
So
but
I think you're our first developer from Poland. Like we've done this a lot, over
I,
300
I think you
developers
meant
on the
like the
show.
first ever, not really in your podcast. Have you actually never been, interviewing a Polish
I
developer?
don't think I have. Like we've spoken to people from Singapore, from Peru, from Spain, from China, Japan, from Russia. I don't think I've ever spoken to a game dev from Poland before.
So,
France, London, all
happy to
across the
be
United
here.
States.
Um,
We're breaking
it's
boundaries
it
over
might be
here.
a little strange. Like I think there's a lot of game developers in Poland,
Mhm.
so it seems almost difficult to have a gaming podcast and not connect with Polish game developers.
What is the Polish the indie game development scene like in Poland?
Big and
Mhm.
vast. What are there any particulars you would like to ask about?
Like name like the most prominent ones you that come to mind immediately. I don't want to say if
Like
I know them because I probably do,
in
but
in terms of developers
yeah,
of indie games.
yeah.
Well, ThinkStrunk is something that comes to mind at first.
Hmm.
They made Book of Demon games, Book of Demons game, and we've actually ported that game for consoles, but
Oh,
no,
nice.
that's not really a reason why I'm so the reason why I'm answering ThinkStrunk is because that's the first thing that came to mind.
Hmm.
But also this is a great indie game. So yeah, the first thing that came to mind is ThinkTrunk. Do you know ThinkTrunk though?
I don't. This is why I like love hate this show sometimes because every time I bring a guest on, they mention some other studio or game that they've seen or that they've worked with, and I end up buying it and just spending more money.
Yeah.
It's just a pitfall of when you're talking to really like sweet indie developers. Um, so I want to move on to your game, and before we dive into what it's about and where the idea came from, I really want to talk about first the the thing that really caught my attention, and that's the perspective switching. And for those who
So
don't know, it's an isometric top-down horror game, but you can switch at will at any time to an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter, and it does it so seamlessly, and it almost looks like a magic trick when you're watching it, and it blew me away when I first saw it. Can you describe the tech behind that and how that all that works and how it looks like again like
not
it's
really
like sorcery?
it for me it's not maybe I'm not that technical in terms
Mhm.
of graphics, in terms of our rendering engine. I can, you know, how it exactly works, how it goes from orthographic view without perspective to perspective. It took a long time for Bartek, our tech artist and vice CEO of Sonika, to make this transition seamless. And yeah, I really don't know how he did that. Like when I proposed something, so the story is that I called Bartek at like 11 p.m. and I told him that I have this wild idea for a prototype because we are prototyping the different combat mechanics.
Right.
And I had this idea that maybe we could switch to some kind of representation of what the player character sees. So the inspirations were like Resident Evil Gaiden, which is NES Resident Evil,
Right.
GBA.
I think
I don't
I
think,
think it was Game Boy Color.
yeah, I don't
Even.
think it was NES. Like, yeah. um, but retro platform Resident Evil, and I had something like this in mind, like maybe some billboard characters and shooting gallery stuff, and maybe like JRPG, like battle background. So if you're like in the house, then you have like a house skybox, and then you have like enemies coming at you from different sides, and you have like your, aiming, shooting section. And he said, yeah, let's try to just switch from isometric to TPP. I think I can do it by, morning. And he, I think, stayed overnight. Stayed up all night. He wasn't at the office
Wow.
at 11 p.m. And by the morning, he had a prototype. He had something that works, but was like vomit inducing in terms of like motion sickness, but it
Right.
worked. And it wasn't that promising at first, just because it was really confusing and sometimes too fast or too slow in terms of many variables, like how fast the camera rotates, how fast it zooms, how fast it changes position. And it was one of like 15, maybe like 10, one of those 10 different prototypes for combat. And it wasn't the most promising one, but it was cool. So we, explored further and further. And in the end, that was something that was, the best from all the prototypes. So we had prototypes for like auto aim in like Resident Evil 1, or
Like a
more.
tank, like a tank control situation, or just a
No,
traditional fixed camera.
no, we've had the Holstin basics and covered in the first demo. So the isometric game, but with 8 different camera angles and camera rotation. But then when we prototyped combat for that game, there were many unknowns. And the first thing that comes to mind is if you hold on the controller the left trigger, so you go to the combat, to aiming, you just auto aim to the nearest or like the enemy that is in front of you, and you have auto aim on that, and you just shoot. It's similar to like for example, Signalis works.
You just took the words out of my brain. I was just thinking about Signalis.
So that was kind of and I think is kind of a default way to make, like obvious way to make, and I'm not like dissing Signal, it's a great game, one of the best out there, but it's, I think, the most obvious way of how you would make combat in survival horror that happens, in isometric. We've also, and other games that have combat in isometric view are more like action focused. So we tried that. We tried like heavy dodge rolls, and a lot of dodge rolls and dodges and a lot of bullets and aggressive enemies, and it worked fine. Like it was a good game and it was fun, but that doesn't like, you know, evoke horror for me. Like it was like
Wow.
like it was the Enter the Gungeon combat basically, and it was
Right. It
great.
became like
Like
a bullet hell or like that fast paced.
yeah,
I love
basically.
how you didn't want to sacrifice the horror aspect, even though the combat you were developing was fun from a gameplay perspective. Your first mission is to make a horror game, and you're thinking, is what I'm doing evoking horror? Do I feel too powerful? Like, where's the when does the fear come in? And that's when you started to maybe
I mean,
adjust and
it's not
rethink.
really, you know, that the game being a horror isn't something that, you know, needs to happen. Like if this combat were making Holstin a better game, then like sure, let's make it. I mean, for example, the you know the newest horror, the newest biggest survival horror, Resident Evil 4 is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, action game. Like
Right.
there's a ton of action. There's like 20 different weapons and a lot of ammo, and in the DLC you as Ada, you know, have a grappling hook and
Right.
you fight an ogre or a giganto.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think there's a way to make a horror game with all the action sequence. I mean, I don't think I know there are games that are
Right.
heavily action, but are horrors or survival horrors. But it ultimately was, we think, a worse game than, you know, having this TPP camera switch.
Yeah,
It was more
it's
fun.
it's just so incredible to watch it because I don't think any other game has a mechanic like this.
I don't think it's in a lot of cases it's not really possible. Like we are using our own rendering engine called 2XD rendering, and um, because of that, we are able to, you know, affect some things that aren't, you know, possible to affect in straight up Unity or, you know, any other engine that you could be using. So there is the aspect of that of using our own engine to render things. But yeah, it's also not, you know, it was one of the most controversial decisions on the team, and controversial in like the original sense, because there was a lot of people that were you know, that thought this is the best thing ever, but there were and kind of still are people that think this is just, you know, a gimmick, that it
Oh,
doesn't really work. Like if you go to let's say Steam discussions
mhm.
or our Discord, there are people that say, you know, this isn't good. Like this is something that shouldn't be in the game. And like I can't really understand why. I really like survival horrors
Mhm.
and I love playing Holstin. So like it's a like I like this mechanic, and you know, it became viral and people
It
like it,
did.
but there's like I think 15-20% of people that just hate it. We have this feedback form at the end of the game, and there's a specific question about the TPP camera switch, and around like 70% of people just, you know, tells
They
like
love it.
answers that hmm,
They
they
love it.
hate it.
Oh,
They hate it. No, no,
70%
no.
loves it. I was gonna
Sorry,
say.
17.
Oh,
I meant
17. Got it.
yeah. So
Okay.
around 17 people, 17% of people are totally against it. They say it's too confusing. They say it's and it induces motion sickness. And I think it kind of we plateaued. Yeah, like there are some things we can still, you know, tweak, like the speed of the camera change,
Hmm.
the speed of how the camera moves and zooms and changes position, like I said at the beginning. But in some cases, I think some people will just not be able to play with the camera switch just because I don't know, like maybe their brain works in some different ways that doesn't really allow that kind of camera switch. Like maybe they actually have motion sickness because of that. Like some people can't
Right.
play VR games.
Right. Of course. But like again, that must be challenging because you can't just you can't accommodate everyone's particular tastes, and you can't just abandon this entire gameplay mechanic over what 17% of your fan base is saying. You can tweak it to make it better, more accessible, and maybe they'll eventually get used to it. But that's a core feature of your design. And to have
Yeah, I mean, you
that chunk of
you
people,
you can never please everyone, right?
correct,
Like,
yeah, of course, and you shouldn't try to either. The
yeah,
second you
like
try, you please no one.
so I have like two answers for that. So
Mm.
first thing is like the secure situation. So like all the journalists that said the game is too hard and there should be like difficulty levels and give the game lower scores. So secure isn't for everyone. Just
Yep.
like some other games are not for everyone. Like one of my most loved games is Hollow Knight, and I have some friends that this game is just too hard for them, even though it's not that hard, but they bounce hard out of Hollow Knight just
Some of those
because of
boss fights are intense though in Hollow Knight, I must
yeah,
say.
definitely. Like some people might not get enjoyment from like fighting 20 times with one boss. So yeah, sure, like it's understandable. Um, but then again, with pleasing everyone, we just released an update like yesterday. We've
Mhm.
released an update, and it like gives there's more localizations, like 15 languages. I think we have some bug fixes, Steam Deck support, and we also have stamina reward. So up until yesterday, the stamina was draining when you were aiming, and we feel that it's good mechanic. Like I like this mechanic when I'm playing the game
Mhm.
because it gives me anxiety on some level, but I'm also one of the best players in Holstin
I
just
would
because of it.
imagine.
Like
It's your game.
yeah, so
It's your baby.
yeah, so this stamina system in the not current but the past implementation was aimed at people that are experienced in Holstin.
Mhm.
So when we had playtests, when we had QA that plays the game, and like most of Sonika team played the game a lot, so we've all liked the stamina implementation, and there are a lot of people that said is great. It gives some level of anxiety that maybe wouldn't be there otherwise. But ultimately, most people were against it. Like most people said it's a wrong mechanic and it shouldn't be there. And it's not something I don't agree with that. Like I think it should be there and it
Mhm.
will be, but it's a question of difficulty levels.
Right.
Like, okay, if you don't want to have the stamina, we turn that off. Like
Mhm.
for the demo and in the final game, let's say this is the like hard level of the game. Let's say now the demo is like on normal.
Mhm.
Just because like 60% of the players at the feedback forum told us, this time implementation is bad. I don't think it's bad. I think it's great, but maybe it's too hard. Just because you haven't had any introduction to the game. In the demo, we just throw you into combat, um, and you haven't had the time to familiarize with it. And also, the demo is different than the game. In the game, you will not go through tunnels just fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. This will be a different game than the demo. So the stamina implementation will work, we think, better. But still, we had to make this change to try to please everyone.
Mhm.
Um, just because we want more people to enjoy the demo and then tweak it on the difficulty level of the final game.
Yeah, I think I saw a poll on your Twitter page asking the same question about the stamina. And it was like, I think like a almost 50-50 split, it looked like when I glanced at it, or it was, more leaning
Yeah.
against the stamina. And it's amazing how, you can still have a, a slightly, larger margin saying we don't like this. And you would say, well, that's cool, but it's still going to be in there in some way. And because, we want it in the game in some capacity. And again, having the option to turn it off if you don't want it, what's the harm in doing that?
Yeah, exactly that. So looking now at the poll, we had 400 votes, and at first the I hate stamina and Holstin option was winning. Then it was mostly 50-50, and it
Mhm.
landed on 51.1 in favor of I love stamina.
There you go. That
Uh,
was yeah, still
but
close though.
it's 50-50
50-50,
basically,
yeah.
and 400 votes on like random Twitter poll is, I think, a big sample size.
Mhm.
So, it was a fairly big poll where, the stamina was the most polarizing thing in Holston. So it's no wonder that it got 50-50.
So that actually leads to a thought I just had, because you have this demo out and you're releasing updates to the demo and you're getting all this feedback from your fan base. So are they like sort of in a way, are they implying like some of the game design elements? Like how much of that influence is making it into the actual game design?
The modern game design school, or like the game design school that is taught for like the last 10 years, is called player-centric game design.
Mhm.
And it requires you to play this your game, to let players play your game and give you feedback. And in like a AAA environment, those playtests are made with specially created rooms with cameras and screen recording, and
Right.
you do that for like a couple hundred people sample size every milestone or so. But yeah, we don't have capacity to do those things, and it's a little bit outdated just because you have the playtest option on Steam and demos and stuff and Google
Mhm.
Forms, and it's easier, and the reach is far more bigger than inviting people to your office. Like
Right.
inviting 500 people to your office is a really big logistically a really big event. But
Sounds like a
having
nightmare.
500, yeah, and having 500 people playing your game on Steam is actually low number.
Mm.
So the statistics, the data we can get from the feedback form at the end are maybe not as powerful as actually having people playing the game recorded, and you can like look where they looking at the time and see where they failed things and stuff. And this is something you have to do on like level design basis, or how hard the quest is. And this is something we've done for the first demo. We had like 50 playtesters. But yeah, so answering your original question, yeah, players are affecting our game design decisions, but not in a way that they tell us that this is something bad, let's change it.
Mm.
It's planned from the start. Like we have some things that players might not even know we are um, researching in terms of the play patterns or stuff. And then within those forms, we have some questions that lead us to getting those answers. We are not looking particularly for if something is controversial, then let's remove that. We again planned from the start what we want to test and what we want to ask. And yeah, this is certainly affecting the maybe not game design decisions, but more of a game development decisions. Because ultimately, we are doing the game for other people, not for ourselves. And again, ultimately, the idea is to reach to as many people, and for as many people to like the game. So yeah.
I wanna pivot for a moment because
So doing this pivot, I will pour myself more coffee into the mug.
all right, so I'll make a note
Like 20 seconds.
to make a little edit in this pivot. Oh man. He's gonna get some coffee. All right.
Yeah.
And he's back. All right. So I do wanna pivot for a moment. Because another thing that stands out with Holstin, aside from the perspective change from isometric to the third person perspective, is the gorgeous pixel art. And I would imagine when creating a game, again, I don't know much about art design or game design. I know very little actually, but I would imagine that having 3D models would be easier to accomplish this perspective change, but you've opted for pixel art instead. Why was that and I applaud you because I love pixel art. Why was that the aesthetic that you chose for this game, and what challenges did it bring up when you wanted to implement this perspective change?
So yeah, maybe it would be easier to have 3D models instead of pixel art, but we actually have 3D models for every object that you can see in the game. Just because we have to have spatial representation of the object for like shadows and lighting and stuff. So every object in the game has 3D model, and pixel art that is drawn from 8 angles. So every object has 8 pixel arts. And you can see those hand-placed pixel arts in every of the 8 camera fixed directions, fixed angles. And then during the camera rotation, you can see the actual 3D model with the pixels that are projected on the 3D model. And this is what you see in TPP view. So you can see the actual 3D model with pixel art textures that are projected onto the 3D model. So in terms of challenges, yeah, the actual pipeline for creating those assets was a massive challenge, was a massive task. And again, Bartek was the one that made majority, like 95, I guess, percent of that. Like the other 5% would be every other people at Sanka giving some thoughts. But if you can call Holstin my baby, which obviously is a little misleading because it's the whole company
Right,
thing.
right, of course,
But if you can call Holstin my baby, then the rendering in Holstin is his baby. So yeah, the actual pipeline to create such assets was a major task and still is for some things. Like just right now, how do you create pixel art looking fire if you want to have it in 3D also when you go to TPP?
Right.
Or how do you create like trees when you have that things? Or any other VFX, to be honest, like to give some, spoilers, we will have great fire system and fire spreading, but we'll also have snow and ice system. So, Red Dead Redemption 2 being the main reference, so you can like leave footprints in the snow. The snow can fall off of the ceilings or the roofs. So a lot of that would be, it's hard to do just because it's a hard thing to do. But then again, it would be much easier if we wouldn't go for the pixel art aesthetic. But and again, answering your question, your ultimate question, the reason why we went for pixel art is that both Bartek and me, we come from pixel art background. So my first work as a pixel artist was as a game developer, was being a pixel artist. And I started commercially working on pixel arts when I was 14 or 15, I think.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so the agreements were in my
What are the
mother's
child
name.
labor laws in Poland?
No, so again, the agreements were in my mother's name, and like my mother actually worked in game dev and she were a pixel artist just because I was doing those things and I couldn't legally, sign an agreement. And I worked for like big companies back then. Like I don't think I can tell you like
Which companies?
yeah, but I've worked on
Or which games? I'm curious. Now this is a whole other line of questioning that I'm super excited to get into.
those pixel art games. So one of these games is released on DSi or the original Nintendo DS. And the other ones were like big clones or major franchises on mobile. So
Gotcha.
like Prince of Persia, but not really Prince of Persia, but similar. So that was so when I was underage, I
Poland.
was working. Yeah, I was working as pixel artist, and we've along with Bartek, we've been organizing. So mainly him. I was just part of that, but we've been organizing PAOPA, which was Polish Association of Pixel Artists. And at some point in time, we've had like 15, maybe 12 best pixel artists in Poland in his basement. So
it's a very specific association, by the way.
Yeah. So we had like I think two
love it.
actual meetings, and we had this website that doesn't exist in a form that it existed like 15 years ago for Polish pixel artists. And I wasn't, and I never really was a great pixel artist. I was just doing some pixel arts. But we've met a lot of great pixel artists that are now world renowned artists, not only pixel artists but artists in general. And one of them is Czarek, which is our pixel artist in Holstin. And Bartek was into pixel art back then, but he was also into like 3D stuff, and he went into like this direction. And
So,
No,
go ahead. I had a question, but I'll get to it later. Go ahead.
So we just wanted to come back to our roots, I guess. Like we all came from pixel art background, and we knew this great pixel artist, which is Czarek or Charlie. And yeah, I don't know if that's official. Like maybe I will tell you to like cut that out. But he worked on The Last Night. He worked on Gestalt.
Oh, The Last Night.
Yeah. So
that game isn't out. Is that game out?
No,
that's not out yet, right?
No.
Yeah, because I remember that was announced at one of the Xbox conferences at E3 like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen that game in a long time.
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons I think why he doesn't, work on it anymore.
Is it just like development hell, that game at this point? or vaporware?
No comment. Like
No,
one thing is that I cannot comment on that, but the
that's
other thing
okay.
is that I don't really know.
Mhm.
But so I don't have any insider info. But still, no comment. Why not?
No comment.
But yeah. So Sharek is one of those people that worked on the great Pixar games
Mhm.
of our era, and he's awesome in pixel art. So
Super talented, and it shows. Again, like if
yeah,
the
so we knew him and we wanted to make a game with him because why not? And Bartek is a great technical artist and
Mhm.
did all the 2XD rendering goodness. So we just wanted to connect that. And I wanted to do survival horror since since I wanted to make games, which was like since I was like 8 years old. So yeah, dream project.
I want to touch on that piece, but I want to go back for a quick second because you said that you're when you were 14, 15 years old, you were working as a pixel artist for big companies. And was it done through your mom? Like your mom was like the person who was like submitting all the work?
No, they
And
knew. They
okay,
knew
because
that
it's
it
like
was
you were
me.
like she was your proxy in a sense, like she was the one whose name was on the contracts, and she
Yeah, she
was the
was
one.
legally there. She legally it was her, but yeah, that was
Okay, but it was like she was pretending like the
no,
work
no,
was
no, no.
hers
The
so you can
company
get it through.
knew
Okay,
it was me. I just told them that I cannot legally sign an agreement. This will be a different person,
correct.
my
Well, you
mother.
yeah, you can't at that age sign any kind of contract. All right, because I was like for
I
a
think you
second.
can though. I think in terms of this specific working agreement, so selling rights to graphic designs, you actually can sign that agreement.
Mhm.
Like I'm not 100% sure, but that would be funny if you couldn't. Like if you're an artist at age of 12 because you're some prodigy, then there has to be some legal things. I'm
Right.
not saying I was a prodigy. I was
I
a
mean,
bad
child
child.
actors exist. I'm sure there's ways to make these things work.
Yeah. So maybe even if they sign through the parents, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's like scam.
As long as you're not being
Scheme.
exploited, I think, in some way, I think, and you're taken care of, and your parents are on board and they're aware, then it's fine. But now I'm wondering as I'm thinking about this more, because one, that must be a really cool thing for a kid your age, because most kids don't even have a job at 14, 15 years old, and here you are doing pixel art for video games. And kids love games. I was a gamer like even before I was in my teens, from the age of like 8 years old, six, I was playing video games. Um, what again? I'm just out of sheer curiosity. What was the pay like? Did they pay you well? Like
No,
was it?
no, I don't think so. I don't really remember the wage, but I was I was considered for this role just because my wage wasn't the best.
Ah,
It was enough to buy myself like I think what I bought is after the first payment, and there was like four during that time for that specific company. What I bought was 256 megabytes of RAM for my computer, and that was a major thing. I think that allowed me to play
man.
Battlefield Vietnam back then. Like the memory is hazy. Maybe that was but whatever, the pay wasn't the greatest. No,
Right.
I was paid on a per icon basis. So I had
Ah,
like, okay, I give like 100 icons, you give me like some hundreds of dollars.
got it. Okay. Interesting. Well, at least it's like it got to fund your passion for gaming and gave you a whopping 256 megabytes of RAM,
Yeah,
which sounds like nothing when you think about it in
that was
today's
a lot.
terms.
That was the computer I think had 64 megabytes of RAM when I bought the 256. And I think it was 64. So Yeah, that was a lot of
Crazy.
RAM back then. Or
Yeah.
maybe it had 128 and I bought another 128. Yeah, I don't remember that much of,
Like
technicalities on RAM, but
I recall my very first computer that I bought in like I want to say the mid 90s. It had 6 or 7 gigabytes on the hard drive. That was the storage space.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm Yeah, that was a lot. I think I had 4 gigabytes on my first, oh, two, no, I had 2 gigabytes on my computer for sure. Um, yeah.
Crazy. All right, so I do want to go back to one thing you said a little while ago, which was, you're really living the dream. You have, some of the best pixel artists working on your game, and you're making a survival horror game, which you've been dreaming of since you were 8 years old. So what made you want to explore this genre and make survival horror? What games in your memory as a young gamer
So
made you
yeah,
love
I
this
mean,
genre so
the
much?
one of the first childhood memories I have is playing Resident Evil 3 with my parents.
With your
And
parents? Holy
yeah, and
shit.
I was like 6, maybe 7 years old. I know for a fact because it was in our first apartment,
Mhm.
and we moved when I was 7. So I had to be 6, maybe 7, maybe even no 5. I don't think so, but I think I was 6. And I vaguely remember going through like magazine with solutions to the game because
Mhm.
we didn't knew English. So we played Resident Evil
Oh,
3 but had no idea what's it up. Like we knew it's about zombies and stuff, right?
right, of course.
But you know, um if you got like key card and it said, use it in the office, like whatever that meant.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
Just try every locked door until it
no, I
opens.
mean we've had this, solution book,
Right.
and it was really popular back then to,
Mhm.
have solutions for all the games printed in magazines. So we played through. We had a borrowed version for the solution of Resident Evil 3. Um, we never had an original game for PSX. Like I'm sure any game for that I had for PSX was pirated, just because my parents didn't knew you can buy like legal games, because you went to the market in my hometown and then you had gaming stuff and there were
Right.
like games. So they hello, I want to buy a game for PSX. I recommend you this one. You just, bought thing. So my parents had no idea they
They
are
thought
in
that's
any
how it
way.
was. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, you bought a
piracy was the
game.
only legitimate way to like
I mean, you
experience.
could you could go, I'm from a fairly small town, like
Mhm.
15,000 people, and you could go to like a bigger town, I think,
Right.
and go buy a game. I'm sure you could, but I don't think I'm sure my parents didn't know about it. They, and it wasn't that cheap. Like, the game
Really?
at the market cost like 50 zloty, and the original game at the time would be like 150.
Mhm.
So, the pirated market wasn't like get the game for like 0. That
Right.
was a lot of, and one thing is that we didn't have um I don't know what's prawo autorskie law in English, to be honest, but even
Like anti-piracy law or
yeah, we didn't have copyrights
oh
until
yes, okay.
until 94. So when we had copyrights, I mean I'm sure we had some kind of copyrights, but then there wasn't. So piracy wasn't a piracy; it was legal, and
Mhm.
until 94, there was no, like some people are telling other people that there were pirates back then, but it wasn't bad, just because we didn't have an idea as a community, as Polish people, I guess, why it would be wrong if it's legal and this is the way to do it.
Did you
So
was it even referred to as piracy or pirates?
no,
Because
no,
again, that has a negative connotation, and if it's legal,
no.
then like that
I
term doesn't even
don't
exist. It's ever in your brain.
I don't think, even in the world war, not only in Poland, piracy term was that known in 94, like 30 years ago. But yeah, so when we had those copyright laws in place in 94, then it was a long time until people actually started buying things for a lot of money, because earlier you could buy a CD of your let's say Abba, and you could pay, I don't know, like pennies for that, and it was legal. So why would you pay 5,000 more of money for that CD a year later?
Right. That must be a big shock, like for those who are used to buying it, like, on the street or in a small market, like pennies to the dollar. And now it's suddenly, well, here's the actual system.
Yeah,
And now you're paying triple the amount of money.
Yeah, so I have I've been lecturing about the topic I want to talk about, so about NES console in Poland, and I will tell you about it just when I get back, and I'll be out in for minute and a half. So
Gotta do another edit.
so there was this guy in Poland, and he used to go to China and buy jeans and other clothes and sell it in Poland. And one time he saw a counterfeit console, and people told them, Chinese businessmen that were doing business with him, told him that it's a clone of NES. It's a great console. You can play it. You can do stuff with it. And we didn't have copyrights at the time. So he bought a lot of those NESs. He named it Pegasus. And this was the
most
popular
console.
Great. So this was the most popular console and the most popular thing in Poland. He went to Poland. He sold the NES under the name Pegasus. And yeah, everyone had Pegasus. We had no idea this is like Nintendo. This is like NES. We all played Mario. We all played Contra. We all played Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, everything. And most of us had 1 in 10,000 cartridge. It was sold, as a set, the Pegasus plus this cartridge. So
Was it all the
We
games on
all
the cartridge? Was that how it
there,
worked?
there were like hundreds of games on those one in
Damn.
10,000 cartridge. So
Even back then they did this shit. It's
yeah, and
crazy.
you bought your Pegasus, which you didn't know it was Nintendo at all, and you
Mhm.
had Mario, which you were like all the kids on my block thought Mario is like Polish thing or from USA maybe, but it's
Mm.
on Pegasus, and Pegasus is and again, I think this guy was selling Pegasus as like a thing from America. Um, and yeah, I remember I had Contra, a lot of Marios. I had like Mario Versus.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think I had Legend of Zelda. I had just one just this one cartridge. I had like some clone of Mortal Kombat on the Pegasus.
Oh my
Like,
God.
yeah, and the funny thing was the person that promoted Pegasus in Poland
Mhm.
was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Ah.
Just because you didn't have copyrights. Um,
Oh man. And
they
I get no idea that Japan was like leading the market and like really started the home
uh,
console, like really pushed it,
no,
to the next level.
you had Arnold Schwarzenegger or Terminator, like just the metal things printed on the Pegasus console
I
box.
have to look this up.
You
Were,
have
were, were
to
there like TV ads, like commercials for this?
exactly yes with Arnold Schwarzenegger
That's
promoting
wild.
Pegasus
That's
console.
wild.
And the guy after that, I think he tried to solve when all the copyright stuff. I think he was. Don't quote me on. I mean, you can quote me because I said I don't know, but I think
Hmm.
he um was the distributor of like Sega consoles,
Hmm.
but they didn't sell well just because we had Sony enter Polish market and stuff.
Hmm.
But Nintendo was for a longest time really not known company in Poland. Like I
Hmm.
think until Switch, to be honest, it was. I mean,
Until the
not
Switch.
yeah. I mean, obviously not as we don't know nothing. We know nothing about Nintendo, but it wasn't like popular. Well, like there's no Smash Bros
Or
nostalgia in
Mario
Poland.
Kart or
No,
those
no,
kinds of
not
things.
at all. Like I knew a couple people that had Nintendo DS.
Hmm.
I knew a couple people that had Wii.
Hmm.
But Nintendo as a brand was only in like Warsaw,
Mm.
in bigger maybe like
The bigger cities.
three bigger cities. But in my hometown, I think there were like maybe five Nintendo consoles or so. Like that, whatever. This is like strange Japanese, brand.
Were you
Uh,
guys primarily PlayStation? Was that like the the
yeah,
the
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
popular
I think so.
brand?
I also didn't know too much people that had Xbox, but yeah,
Hmm.
everyone had PS1 and their
Hmm.
PS2 because DVD player and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, Nintendo was, and that's also you know, that's the thing with Nintendo. I'm fucking angry with them because they really neglect Poland, even now.
Oh.
So we had the worst distributor of all time before the Switch. Like they released games in French or German in Poland.
Hmm.
They had like so you have the Mario Galaxy
Yes.
releasing on Wii U.
Hmm.
And I think I don't remember correctly, but they allocated 500 units for Poland.
For the
Like,
entirety of Poland.
yeah, yeah,
500.
yeah, yeah. At the release day. So that was the situation with Wii U and all this stuff. Now we have a lot better distributor and we have fair, representation of Nintendo in Poland.
Hmm.
But what is Nintendo doing themselves is, and I actually wanted to make like an open letter with all the Polish developers to Nintendo with that.
Hmm.
Nintendo doesn't acknowledge Polish language at all.
Hmm.
So one thing is that they are not, translating their games to Polish. That seems strange to me because we have, big game dev community, we have big gaming community, but if they don't want to translate their games into Polish, sure, like, okay, do French, do Italian, do Spanish, don't do Polish, sure. But we as developers cannot even tick the language on the eShop. Like, there's no way to tell people that this language is available in the game on the eShop console itself, eShop, on the console.
Right.
This language doesn't exist in the backend of Nintendo. So the only way to tell people no, there's no way actually. There's no actual way to tell people that after you download the game, you can have this game in Polish, which is abysmal. Like, this is something that shouldn't, ever be done on.
That's interesting because I was speaking to a developer a few weeks back who he's based out of Spain now, but he was originally from Italy. That's his background. And Italy and game dev and just gaming as an overall hobby aren't hugely popular in that part of the world. They see it more as like a kid's thing, a kid's pastime and a hobby. Like, once you're past a certain age, you shouldn't be playing games, and the idea of entering game design isn't like, a sought after career path for most people. They've come around recently, but like the mindset is very old school and old world when it comes to that. But I see more Italian language options available than I do Polish.
Yeah, obviously, like, Italian is one of those languages that you
One
have
of
to
those
include your game.
languages.
Yeah,
It's
and
fascinating.
it's strange.
Yeah.
It's like so, like, Sony and Xbox are doing the Polish localizations, the voiceover localizations. Sure, like, Poland is a great market for games. We have one of the greatest games in the world from Poland. We have CD Projekt and Techland and 11-bit Studios and Sonka. And
I love 11-bit Studios. That's a
I
great
love them
studio.
too, yeah. And there's a lot of, and there are companies in Poland that have. So, for example, you have Forever Entertainment and Cubic Games, which those two companies, I think, released the most, like, not the best, but the most games on Nintendo Switch. Like, I think Cubic Games released like 100 games and on Switch, and I think this is the most number, like, Guinness record for releasing games on Switch as one publisher. And I know Nintendo has relationships with Polish gaming communities. I've been seeing Nintendo of Europe face to face 4 times now. They've been at Sonika's offices once, and still we don't have Polish language, not only in as voiceover options in like Zelda, not only as text options in like every other game, not only as console language, but we don't even have a way to tell Polish people that there's a Polish language in the game, which is.
Now, how does that impact Holstin? Like, I know it's only on Steam for the time being, right? Is there a console version in the works?
I mean, we will
or is it in the pipeline? And would
no,
that
we will release Holstin on all the consoles. We will release demos before the release. But yeah, it doesn't affect Holstin at all that you don't have Polish language. You can have Polish language in the game, like,
right? You have both English and Polish voice acting.
Well, for now we have only Polish voice acting.
Right, but is the goal to have eventually English voice acting?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And the Polish one, I like the Polish, to be honest. It's like, I just like how it sounds.
We are doing Polish voiceovers for now just because we can have direction over how they're recorded, and we can like do in-person castings for the forecast. So we want to go with Paul. We can ensure that this is high quality voice acting, for the start, and then we can, we will not go to USA or whatever native speaking English, nationality we will choose for Holstin. We will not go there and do like months of casting, recording, and stuff. So we want to have example of like original material that will tell them to do that. It in most or all other cases it worked the other way around. Like obviously other actors record after English ones, like like Disney movies and stuff. So it will be funny for to see Hollywood voice actors to do.
You should get Schwarzenegger to do your voice acting.
I haven't understand. I didn't understand what you said.
No, I said get Schwarzenegger to do your voice acting.
Oh yeah, that would be We will have Pegasus in the game though. Like it's as a
reference, a little Easter egg.
No, I mean just as a thing that
as
is
a thing.
in the game. Like
I wonder if that's why Nintendo doesn't want to have a Polish language option, because the Pegasus sort of replaced.
I mean that was like 35 years ago or 30 years ago. So I don't think
I'm just joking.
Nintendo. Yeah, but we were talking with Nintendo Europe, like some representatives of Nintendo Europe about Pegasus, and they don't even know about it. So that's also strange.
Yeah. All right. So that was a nice little pivot from going from Resident Evil 3 being an inspiration to the history of the NES in Poland.
Yeah.
And Polish language localization. All right, I think we should do a few rapid fire questions to end the show, to learn a little bit more about you, and because I could talk to you forever, I feel, because this whole talk about Poland and the Pegasus and the piracy market and all of that, I find truly
please check out the history of Pegasus.
I'm going to, like, the second I jump off this call, I'm gonna just do a deep dive because it sounds very interesting. So as someone who is developing a survival horror game and from a very young age loved and played horror titles, what scares you? What makes you afraid?
Afraid of spiders.
Spiders.
I'm really like I learned how to live with that. But I have this primal, scare of them, and I don't really like the ocean. The idea of being at the center of the ocean like scares me.
Just like out in the middle, like in the open water.
Yeah.
That's a common answer, I feel. Like if it's not being on the ocean, it's just what's underneath, like what's in the deep ocean depths terrifies people.
This is there's a big subreddit for that phobia. I don't remember how is it called, but yeah, there's this scare of the ocean phobia that has
thalassophobia, I think is the term.
Yeah, so that's the subreddit. I frequented that before the Reddit third up support ended and stuff. I was a Redditor like an hour a day. And I frequented that sub, and like I wasn't scared of what's underneath, but I really loved the aesthetics of that, I would say.
If you had an opportunity to work on any survival horror franchise, if they said, we want you to make the next Silent Hill or the next Resident Evil or the next Dead Space, which franchise would you pick to work on?
Can I go with no?
Oh, you wouldn't do it? You would just refuse?
No,
you would just, I will politely decline your offer.
Yeah, I don't think
if they gave you a blank check, like here, unlimited money, funds, budget, It's your vision.
Yeah, I mean, if I
It's
was
a dream scenario. You can't turn it
no,
down.
no, it's not. So, if I were like the namesake behind, let's say, Resident Evil, like I was, Resident Evil 10 by Rafał Sankowski, like Metal Gear Solid by Hideo Kojima, and I would fuck that up. Like I would make a really bad Resident Evil 10 game that would be, something that would go, behind me for the rest of my
Listen,
life.
let's not worry about what the result would look like, or if the fan base would, totally destroy you online with comments.
I would love to make game in Resident Evil franchise.
Mhm.
Like, if let's say we could do Holstin that happens as a side story, like a spin-off to Resident Evil, great. I don't really understand Silent Hill enough to I'm a Resident Evil nerd, so I can like I could make a game in this world, and I'm sure that I would fulfill the fan base requirements for it to be a Resident Evil game. But in terms of like being a Silent Hill game, I think I would make a worse game than the movie is about Silent Hill. And in terms of Dead Space, I only played the remake, and I loved the remake. But then again, I'm not really into space and games.
Well, again, it doesn't have to be any of those three. Like anyone that comes to mind that you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, Resident Evil comes to mind. So yeah.
Got it. All right. Now, if you were given the chance to bring back a franchise that hasn't had any attention,
Vagrant Story.
Oh my God, I love you.
Yeah, Vagrant
One of my
Story
favorite games of all time.
Is the best game
easily.
Ever. So
holy shit.
So have Vagrant Story picture in your mind. Do you remember the camera in Vagrant Story?
I do.
So you could rotate the camera in 8 ways, and you could go into first person mode.
Yes,
just like in Holstin.
Oh, yeah. What do we have here?
Yeah. So
that is like the most unlikely inspiration point. I would never have connected Vagrant Story to Holstin, but now it's always going to be in my mind.
It is a great game. I love. So if I were to make any game at all, I would love to, work with Square Enix or Squaresoft.
Squaresoft.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah. So I would love to make Vagrant Story. It's definitely one of my most like remembered game, and I had a lot of returns to the game.
That's a deep game too, system wise.
And
it was ahead of its time.
Definitely, and that's why it's like cult classic, because there's not a lot of people that know about Vagrant Story, I feel. But yeah, when I'm returning to the game, it's always as good as I remember that. I think it's good graphics. In terms of PS1 graphics, like Vagrant Story.
That was like, it came at the tail end of the PS1's life cycle, and it was just the most cutting edge looking.
It was 3D, for God's sake, like
completely 3D rendered.
There wasn't really any RPGs, like for example, Final Fantasy VII had these characters that looked like stickmans in comparison to Vagrant Story, and you had particle effects and spells that looked amazing, and you had great story, very deep one, and you had combat mechanics that were never seen before and after Vagrant Story. Like this real-time turn-based gameplay was awesome, and this effect for the your range, the combo system, the deepness in crafting. This game is awesome.
I remember, I think the most I ever got was maybe like a 25 hit combo, and the timing on that was always so satisfying. Like timing the button presses to keep the swipes going and then going from different combinations.
Yeah. So as a kid, I would
I want to play it
grind
right
the
now.
combos. I would go to because I don't know if you remember or knew about it, but there's this mechanic where you have your mannequins where you can train your
Yes,
combos.
yes,
But
yeah.
the
In
mannequins
the first little
were,
section that you're in the
there were a
game, I
lot
think.
of them, and the mannequins had particular type attached to them. And the weapons, they were changing their stats based on who you were fighting with. So for example, your weapon could be against, living creatures or undead
Undead,
creatures.
yeah. Or
You
like
could
beast
have,
types or animal types.
yeah,
Yeah.
beast versus like human, or
Mhm.
like lizards versus dragons, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of those things. So for example, when you encounter like lizard based mannequin, you could, like, I would spend 2 days just perfecting combos on this
Oh
lizard,
my
so my
God.
affinity with lizard based enemy
Oh
would
my
grow.
God.
As a
Yes,
kid.
and
And
the affinity system too. Oh
yeah.
my God. See, when I think
uh,
of that game, I think of a little bit of Parasite Eve because of that little the dome.
Parasit, give me another 2 minutes. I have to answer the door in the office.
So again, thinking about Vagrant Story reminds me a lot about Parasite Eve, another one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah,
A great horror game.
I don't really remember Parasite. Like, I've played through 1 and 2, again with my parents, as with Resident Evil games for PSX. I just remember again this your range system, and this game. Yeah, also like Vagrant Story had this real time slash turn feel. Uh,
Man, if there's
but
any
was it a good
game.
game? Like, I have to play it again.
No, so I played it very recently, and again, it took me a while for like the muscle memory to kick back in with the combos, but everything holds up very well. I mean, the graphics, the soundtrack, the gameplay. Um, I just love it's timeless, that game. I
It's
love it.
Capcom 2, right?
Which? Vagrant Story or
No, I mean, no, I meant the Parasite Eve in terms of, is it good?
oh,
Um,
Parasite Eve, I think is still a very good game.
Vagrant Story, yeah, I played a lot of
Parasite
Vagrant
Eve is
Story.
an amazing game. I mean, I revisit Parasite Eve like very often.
Uh,
Um, that's one of my all-time favorites. That's a classic in my opinion. And that game I think deserves another look at that franchise. Be it a remake or a sequel, it needs something new because that's an IP that deserves some love from Square Enix.
so Parasite Eve is Square Enix?
Yes,
Okay.
it came out after I think Final Fantasy VII. It was like they call it the cinematic RPG. There's a lot of FMV cutscenes in that game. Um, Again, that's I think that's where Vagrant Story kind of got that little dome area effect with the
Yeah.
combat because they had a similar system where your handguns had different ranges versus your shotguns and your assault rifles.
And there were a lot of like spells and stuff, right?
There
Like,
was magic in that game too, and you could like tweak and change the stats on your guns with this little tool
yeah,
system. So
so
yeah, a lot of those elements
similar
kind
to,
of found their way into Vagrant Story. So it laid the foundation for what made Vagrant Story so great. All right, let's ask you one last question before we say goodbye. Um, if you could take any game that you've played in your entire history of playing video games and erase it from your memory and then play it again for the first time and experience that joy, that excitement, like when you first played it, which game would that be?
yeah, I don't think the answer will be original. Like, that will be Breath of the Wild.
Oh, Breath of the Wild. That's a recent game too. It's a
Yeah,
magical game.
it was the most magical game for me. Just because, it was, I think, the first console I actually bought myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the first console for sure I had, on the launch day. So, waiting for a console, waiting for a game, playing this game for the first time and experiencing I'm not really into open world games,
Mm-hmm.
but experiencing Breath of the Wild's version of the open world was magical, yeah. And it was like 6 years ago, right? So it's not
Yeah.
that recent.
Yeah. Well, compared to someone who's been playing games since they were, 8 years old, going back to the PlayStation 1 and then your Nintendo. So you've been
Yeah, but
playing
I
games
mean,
for a
those
while.
games the games that I've played when I was 8, I don't really have to erase the memory. Like, I don't really remember them that well.
They've already been erased as far as you're
Yeah,
concerned.
and then I actually so I played Vagrant Story when again I was 6, maybe 8, maybe
Mhm.
9. But I understood the story when I replayed the game when I was like 23.
Mhm.
Like, just because I didn't know English at
Mhm.
all when I was little. So all I knew about Vagrant Story is that it's about a guy with a sword
Mhm.
that goes through, dungeons. And you play a guy with a sword that kills monsters,
Mhm. You
basically.
fight
There's like some
bats,
zombies, yeah,
lizard
bats, and
people, and the occasional
yeah,
giant dragon that comes in
yeah,
your
yeah,
way.
yeah, and Minotaur and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So good.
I don't think I ever finished Vagrant Story as a kid. So it was like sometimes there was this like retrospection of like my wife and kid, I think, in Vagrant
Mhm.
Story. And I was like, okay, some story content, let's skip that because I don't understand a
Don't
word.
understand it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's time to revisit once Holstin comes out and you have some more free time and you can.
No, I revisited
Oh, you have. Okay, so you're good.
Vagrant Story
So
in
you're good.
like 5 different instances. I think I played. No, I love Vagrant
Oh my
Story.
god.
I don't know how the word vagrant is in English pronunciation, but I love the Polish version of that. So Vagrant Story. This
Vagrant.
is yeah. Yeah, no. I revisited it a lot.
Well, thank you for telling me your story today. I really appreciate it. I am super excited for Holston. When can we expect the full version? Is there like a date in the back of your mind for like a target release, or what does the roadmap look up until the full release of the game?
Yeah, so there is a date in my head
Mm-hmm.
about for hosting release, but the official date is not 2023, and that's
Well, yeah, I
everything.
wouldn't imagine it coming out anytime this
Yeah,
year.
and this is the only official thing that we have
Okay,
for hosting
so
right
it's
now.
the date is not this year.
Exactly.
All right. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun. I learned a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna learn more when I do some Pegasus research and all of that. And until next time, listeners, please go check out this game, wishlist it, play the demo. It's a lot of fun. It'll change your world. Um, and support indie devs that make amazing, original experiences. And until next time, please be excellent to each other.